What's up, Archons? I'm Flightless Pheasant, and now that you're here, we can prepare a seance because today we're contacting the other side. But before we do, I'm a huge fan of Keyforge, and if you are too, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell, as I'll be bringing you even more lore from Keyforge and the Crucible. Today we're going to be doing something really special. We're going to be doing a little bit of post-mortem investigation into some confirmed deaths in Keyforge. That's right, Grim Reminders is just around the corner, and with some of it already in hand, many of you probably know that there's a series of cards coming out in that set that are representative of characters who died and have been brought back to life to stalk the game once again. We're going to look at those characters and their card arts, both old and new, to try to determine how they may have died. And once we're done with that, we'll even take a stab at trying to figure out why they're back to begin with. Also, I have one additional surprise besides that for you, so this is going to be a really exciting video. Without any further ado, let's get into our first fatality. So I'm going to try to do these in chronological order as much as I can, and with that in mind, I want to start with Duma the Martyr. Duma the Martyr is the only character on this list that we have a confirmed cause of death for, because she died in one of the short stories that was used to promote the launch of the original set, Call of the Archons. This story, written from the perspective of Inca the Spider, called Gate of Hope, talks about how Duma held off an army of alien creatures known as Gorgers, while a bunch of refugees were being shuttled across the Gate of Hope by Champion Anaphiel up to the Sanctum Hold of Brighthaven. In the heroic defense, she ends up being overwhelmed and dies, and is dubbed a martyr. Now she's back as Duma the Returned, and she seems every inch the hero she was before, ready to defend the Crucible once again against the newest of threats. Next up on our list we have Overlord Grekking, who's been suspiciously absent since the Age of Ascension set. My best guess is that his reach exceeded his grasp and he was killed, either by a stronger enemy, like one of the dinosaurs that arrived with Worlds Collide, or by a member of his own house when he stepped out of line, maybe even Lord Invidious himself. Either way, he was definitely killed. But now he's back as Immortal Grekking, which is honestly pretty concerning, as it looks like he's upgraded from animating ghosts to reviving corpses, which seems like a pretty terrifying concept for someone with his ambition. Remember that special surprise I mentioned? Well, the time has finally come. The next guy's going to get the royal treatment, as my fellow YouTuber Aembermedes has agreed to join us on the channel and give us a hand. So without further ado, I'll throw it over to him.
How's it going, my fellow Archons? I'm super excited to be here making an appearance on Flightless Pheasant's channel.
I'll be talking about Phantom Drummernaut, that is, Drummernaut from AOA returned in spectral form. We speculate that Drummernaut may have been the victim of his own music, bringing the place down on top of him with his beats. The flavor text of Ged Hammer helps support this theory, reading, "The Brobnar music group Brocken formed after an industrial accident, itself possibly caused by their first concert, credited to Rezon, a Logos music critic." So potentially, Drummernaut died in this industrial accident during the first concert of the Brocken band. Looking over to Harmala Toon's flavor text, it reads, "Brocken burns through drummers at a dizzying pace." Brocken drummers clearly wield some pretty immense power if the band cycles through them that quickly. First Drummernaut, then Harmala Toon, and possibly some others in between. And one last cool thing to note is that each Brobnar drummer has an in-game effect that returns friendly Brobnar creatures to their owner's hands. War Drummer, Drummernaut, and Harmala Toon each do this in one way or another. Just a fun bit of trivia for you.
Thanks, Aembermedes. It was really nice having you over. Our next guy managed to survive until Worlds Collide, but that's the last we see of Cincinnatus Rex. This one's a bit of a mystery to me, as I'm not really sure what happened. I'm certain that he died nobly defending some Saurian colony or another, but I don't really have a good guess as to who he was defending it from. Neither his card art nor the set in which he disappears gives me any good information, as the only major event of Worlds Collide was the crash landing of the Star Alliance ship, the Quantum, and try as I might, I just can't imagine the friendly people of Star Alliance mounting a full-on assault on a Saurian city. Still, no matter what enemy he died to, he's back now as Cincinnatus resurrects it, making his way out of the underworld and to the front lines, as his new ability allows him to enter as a 9 power with 4 armor. No more hiding behind a wall of spears and shields for this soldier. Our next gal is the aptly named Xenos Bloodshadow. This notorious hermit did everything she could to not get involved in the affairs of the Crucible, but it seems even she couldn't stay out of it when the opening of the Dark Amber Vault created a mutant outbreak during the events of the Mass Mutation set. Likely she tried to fight off anyone foolish enough to disturb her in her home of Fangtooth Cavern, but it seems she wasn't strong enough to overcome the newly empowered mutants of the Crucible. Luckily for her, she's back, now as Xenos Dark Shadow. Hopefully the name change and newly incorporeal body will be enough to convince people to really leave her alone this time. And if not, a high power, armor, hazardous, assault, and splash attack value should probably do the trick. Our next four all last appeared during the Dark Tidings set, which had a number of significant events take place during its canon. But this first guy, Dr. Vroctor, I don't think managed to see any of that happen. It doesn't seem like much of a stretch to believe that the same groundbreaking discovery that resulted from his reckless experimentation in his rooftop laboratory left him in as many pieces as it did the surrounding area, meaning that he didn't have to deal with any of the problems that were about to plague the Crucible. And now that he's back as ghostly Dr. Vroctor, it doesn't seem like his new incorporeal form has done anything to increase his caution. If anything, he seems even more reckless now that his body is that of a ghost. I foresee another discovery in the near future. This next one's kind of weird because it didn't even start out as a creature. This is Encounter Suit, and as you can clearly see, it's an upgrade. Now, this begs the question, how can protective clothing die? And while I'm not sure I can answer that question, I think I can take a stab at when it died. I believe the original wearer of this particular suit was part of the team that took on the Keyraken with the Vortex Celian during the Rise of the Keyraken adventure. And, well, it didn't make it. But, as any good suit would, it has reanimated itself as the new and improved Encounter Golem. And now that it's shed its pesky wearer, it's ready to explore even more extreme environments than ever before. Truly, it's become an unrivaled tool for exploration. Then we have Portal Monger, who was almost certainly a member of the evil Aquan cult that orchestrated the release of the Keyraken as part of a plan to open a portal to another dimension of evil twins and bring about the end of the world. Oh, but don't worry though, this ne'er-do-well and all of their co-conspirators were defeated during the events of the Abyssal Conspiracy adventure, and it seems they weren't able to escape the conflict unscathed. Now they're back as Portal Monster, and it seems they're looking to take a much more active role in terrorizing the surface dwellers with visions of the endless deep staring into their souls as this spectral fishman cuts a swath of fear across the countryside. Our last victim of the Dark Tidings set comes from the House of Shadows in the form of Smiling Ruth. Ruth was a thief of some considerable skill in her last life, but if you ask me, she looks a little long in the tooth in her previous artwork. My guess is that the various threats of the Dark Tidings set were too much for an aging thief, and she passed away, likely while participating in one last job before retiring. But it seems she was able to steal a second chance at life as Spectral Ruth. And now that she's back, she seems a lot more vigorous without all of that back, neck, and leg pain. Actually, that doesn't sound too bad. How do I sign up for Resurrection Chiropractic Care? And is it covered by my insurance? Now we get into the most recent deaths, and we start with Quixel Plague Master. This guy appeared as recently as the Winds of Exchange set, meaning his time without a body was likely fairly short. I also don't think it's particularly difficult to guess at his cause of death, as the Martian enclaves experienced a pretty significant schism when the Ironics rebels mobilized the warrior caste against the Martian leaders during Winds of Exchange. Since he was a plague engineer, it's very likely that the Ironics targeted him for assassination or execution, apparently successfully. But, much like the plagues he crafted, you can't keep a good Quixel down, and now he's back as a Grave Master. A sidebar, I want to talk a little bit about his name change, as he seems to have picked up an extra X in the afterlife. I don't know if this extra letter has any particular significance, or if it's just an error, but given the recentness of his last printing, I'm inclined to believe the former over the latter, though personally I have no guess as to what the significance might be. The last on our list of Revenants is General Zaora, who appeared as recently as the Winds of Exchange set, so he can't have died very long ago. And actually, I'm going to hazard a guess and say that he survived until the early parts of the Grim Reminder set, when one or more of his discarded possessions were reanimated by the new Geistoid house, and proceeded to beat him to death, or something. But he's already back as revived Zaora, and he seems keen on taking a much more active role in the race for wealth and keys, as he's the only key cheat among his undead brothers. Okay, at the start of this video, I promised you guys my theory on why all of these characters have made their way back from the realm of the dead to rejoin the story on the Crucible. And I promise we're almost there. But first, I want to call out a Revenant that I think we may have overlooked. This guy, Captain Flint, appears in the Great Hunt adventure that shipped along with the Grim Reminders game found. And I think he's a Revenant as well, given that he has the Spectre trait and the bluish skin that seem to mark all of the other Revenants. But since this is the first time he's ever appeared, I couldn't even begin to speculate at a cause of death. Still, it was a really interesting find while I was playing through that adventure for the first time, and I thought it deserved a mention in this video. Okay, so as promised, I'm going to give you my theory of why all of these undead are suddenly back. Are you ready? I'm putting my money on House Untamed as the culprit. Okay, so hear me out. Yes, I realize that all of the Revenants have the Spectre trait, just like most of House Geistoid, and because the Revenants appeared in the same set that introduced House Geistoid, it might be natural to assume that they're responsible. And in some ways I think they are, but I don't think House Geistoid made the Revenants. First of all, everything else that House Geistoid reanimated seems to be non-sentient garbage, not corpses or people. And second of all, the Revenant's pale blue skin doesn't look anything like the glowing lights and plasmic shapes of the specters of House Geistoid, leading me to believe that there are actually two different processes at work here. So why do I think Untamed is responsible? Well, first of all, I find it odd that House Untamed is in this set in the first place, seeing as they were only gone for one set, Winds of Exchange, and because bringing them back made them present in 6 out of the currently 7 sets, the only house to do so. Seems a bit excessive, unless they have a role to play in the story. I believe the Witch Queen, along with a number of other witches, have performed a ritual at the heart of the forest to turn it into the dark heart of the forest as part of a process to resurrect soldiers to fight back against the animated garbage of House Geistoid. I think you can see some early attempts at this process in cards like Came Back Wrong and Cauldron, but overall, I can't really say whether this was a success or a failure. Sure, they managed to resurrect some people, but about half of the ones they brought back seem like problems in their own right, and they don't really seem like they're going to be a whole lot of help in this current situation. Still, I guess it makes sense to fight undead machines with undead soldiers. Right? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, as I had a really good time trying to puzzle out the ends of all of these characters. It was definitely a mental workout. Also, what did you think about my theory of where they all come from? Do you agree with me, or do you have a theory of your own? Go ahead and put it down in the comments, as I'm interested to hear what people think about this. And it was really fun to do a collab video. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again in the future. If you want to check out Aembermedes' video where he ranks all of the Revenants, I've linked it down in the description below, so go on over there and take a look. Well, that's really all I have for you today, so until next time, later, Archons!